Hello friends and welcome to our segment Expert Talk. The topic of discussion today is learning requirements for first line managers. Our guest today is Mr. Ankur Mithal, who will be in conversation with Mr. NIgam, who is the Managing Director of Stratbeans. Ankur is an industry veteran, having played a variety of roles working for leading players in the banking and BPO industries. An alumnus of the Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad, Ankur has promoted FAB Advisors and Mentors Private Limited, a company actively engaged in promoting online education, and WorkReadyKnowledge Solutions that seeks to productize the e-learning and hiring businesses through its innovative people tech solutions. He is also a published author. His works including What Happens in Office, Stays in Office, and Some Method, Some Madness, Managing BPO in India. So let's move on to the discussion and see what we can learn from it.
Hey Ankur, what is a first line manager?
Okay, so Samir, I think let's break it up into two parts, first line and manager. So manager is in the organizational context has been a very highly used, almost an overused term. So organizations have used manager to connote hierarchy rather than the actual content of the job. So for example, you could have an assistant manager at the doing a job, you could have a senior manager, or you could have a manager. So many organizations have tended to use the term manager to define hierarchy within the organization. Whereas if you take a more universal approach, a manager is somebody who gets work done of some sort, right? And again, in a universal connotation, a manager is one who gets the work done through the help of other people in the organization. So the most common, lowest common denominator as a definition for term manager would be a person who gets work done in the organizational context with the help of other people. So that's how I would define a manager in an organizational context. Now, if you add first line to it, a first line manager is a person, like we just discussed, who gets work done with the help of people who are at the front line. The worker bees, as we call them in the organization, and the guys who the organization relies upon for collecting and generating most of the revenue streams. So a first line manager is a guy who sits on top of the first line of resources within the organization. That's how I would define a first line manager.
Okay, so if that's the case, then I'm sure training is very important for first line managers. And what is your view on that?
Yeah, of course, absolutely. See, what happens is that typically in many industries, the first line of resources are the ones which the company uses for generating revenue. So that's of immediate importance for the company. So they focus a lot on training the people who are at the front line, right? But as you keep moving from the front line to becoming a front line or a first line manager, then the immediacy of generating those revenues starts going down, while you're still playing a very important role, because now instead of being an individual worker who generates revenue on the basis of your own capability, once you move to a first line manager's role, you're now actually generating revenue with the help of probably 10 resources or 20 resources. So your role is very important. But since you yourself are not generating any revenue for the business often tends to treat first line managers as people who can wait to learn or who should learn on their own, right? But at the same time, we must understand that for the company, it's probably a more important role, because he's now responsible. He could make or mar the revenue generation from 10 resources, right? So that is why, in my view, training and ensuring that first line managers are competent and capable is probably even more important than training of the front line resources. So in that context, a front line manager or a first line manager is one who could really make or mar the business.
Yeah, that sounds interesting. So I understand that you are a specialist in also the e-learning domain. So therefore, do you see that can be leveraged for first line manager training, or is it of any specific usage when it is done through e-learnings for training first line managers?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like I said earlier, so because of the immediacy of generation of revenue from the frontline workers, many organizations tend to focus on training inputs for those frontline resources, whereas they tend to sort of shy away a little bit or tend to delay the training requirements for first line managers. And there is also an expectation within organizations that since now you've grown from a frontline worker to a first line manager, you should take more responsibility and ownership for your own training, right? So in this context, in this worldview, I think e-learning comes to play a very important role. So e-learning makes resources available for people who wish to learn and who want to learn. Companies make them available for people who are frontline or first-line managers so that they can demonstrate their commitment to the organization as well as learning on their own, on the go, rather than waiting for the organization to pick them up, put them into a classroom, put an instructor on top of you and ensure that you're learning, which is what is done for the frontline resources, right? So from that context, I think e-learning has a very critical role to play in the training of first-line managers, because it gives them control over their careers. They can choose what they want to learn. They can demonstrate their competence and their interest in the business to the organization by participating in more programs like that, and also take more ownership. It's no longer, you're no longer saying that, hey Mr. Organization, or hey Mr. Manager, or hey Mr. CEO, I'm dependent on you for everything. I will wait for you to pick me up from my work, put me into a classroom and ensure that I learn. Now I'm saying I'm a competent person. I have responsibility for my own career, and I will take those responsibilities seriously by ensuring that I participate in the resources that you make available for me. So I think on the balance, I think e-learning probably has a very critical role to play for first-line managers in all industries.
So thank you very much, Ankur. I understand that first-line managers are that critical to the organizations, and therefore using best of the methods, including e-learnings, is going to be very essential.
Sure.
Thanks.
So thank you.
Now that was a very informative session. If you guys also enjoyed it, you can like and share the video. You can also subscribe to our channel to get more updates on our expert talks. See you soon.